This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Hone, and it's Monday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Over the years, I've looked at a lot of creature stat lines, and we're looking at another one today with 5 mana 5/5s, the topic of this video. 5 mana for a 5/5 is a reasonably efficient stat line. It's not an incredible one, but it's one that if you only tack on a few things to, can make for a pretty good creature. To be eligible for this list, obviously a card had to have a mana value of 5 and power and toughness each equal to 5 as well. In all, there were 77 cards eligible for this list, and in this video we'll take a look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes events like Pro Tours and Set Championships. And a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point, and this includes events like Magic Fests and Grand Prix. Before we jump into the list, I want to tell you about this video's special sponsor, Into the AM. Since mid-2021, they've been sponsoring a few MTG Top 10s a month, and that's been great, especially because they make some great stuff, including graphic tees like this one. This one is called the Breakthrough Tee and features a rocket presumably breaking through the atmosphere, and it's a really neat design. With Christmas just a few days away, this is a great time to visit Into the AM to buy some last-minute gifts, or just get some gifts for yourself. If you use my special link in the description, you'll get 10% off of your entire purchase. Alright, let's jump into our list of the top 10 5 mana 5/5s in Magic the Gathering. At number 10, it's Razormane Masticore. This 5 mana 5/5 comes with First Strike, and it does 3 damage to a creature during your draw step every turn, something that can obviously generate a ton of value and really let you dominate the board. Like with most Masticores in Magic, you do have to pay a cost to keep it around. In this case, you have to discard a card at the beginning of your upkeep or you lose the Masticore. You can plan for that pretty effectively though, and that's often the right move, since this just picks off creatures and is very difficult to block or attack through. You can sort of look at it as it makes one card in your hand into a lightning bolt that can only target creatures, but costs 0 mana every turn. While in Standard, the Masticore was played in mono-blue control decks as well as fairies. It also has seen some significant play in Vintage, where it's played in artifact-centric mud decks, and it's also a sideboard card in Oath of Druids. At number 9, it is OBZEDAT, Ghost Council. This 5 mana 5/5 has an Enter the Battlefield ability that drains the opponent 2 life. That wouldn't be super exciting if that's all this was, so it's a good thing OBZEDAT is a whole lot more than that. During every instep, you can choose whether you want to exile it, and if you do, it returns on your next upkeep with haste. This means that it can represent some very serious inevitability, since it will trigger that Into the Battlefield ability every single time, in addition to being able to swing right away. It was a great win condition for control decks in both Block and Standard, and that's really the only place it was played. It hasn't gained any points since 2014. At number 8, it is TEGANTHA, the Wellspring, a 5 mana 5/5 that can tap to add one of each color to your mana pool, though you can only use that mana to pay for colored costs. That isn't the most amazing card. However, TEGANTHA is also a companion that has a very easy companion requirement. You just can't have any cards in your deck with double colored mana in their casting cost. Decks don't really go out of their way to play TEGANTHA as a companion. It's more like they build their deck and then look at it and it just so happens to meet the requirement, so why not run TEGANTHA for free? If you do, it effectively starts in your opening hand, although you have to pay 3 mana to actually put it there before you cast it these days because the companion mechanic has been nerfed, but it's still free, and that's allowed it to accumulate a lot of points. Some of the decks that have run TEGANTHA include Standard and Historic Sacrifice, Standard Naya Aggro, Standard Winota, Modern Gruul Aggro, Pioneer Jeskai Ascendancy, and Vintage Mud. Because it's so easy to make TEGANTHA your companion, it's going to continue to gain points at a pretty good clip. At number 8, it is SIGARDA, host of Herons. SIGARDA is a pretty scary creature to be staring down, and is one of the hardest creatures to kill in the game. She's of course a 5 mana 5/5 with flying, but she also has hexproof and is immune to edict effects, and that means the only way you can get rid of her outside of combat is with board sweeping effects. And while you're trying to find one of those to take care of her, she's hitting you for 5 every turn in the air, so it's not a lot of fun if you aren't the one controlling her. In Standard, her primary homes were Selesnya aggro and several different kinds of control decks, not to mention Bant hexproof decks which took advantage of a bunch of creatures with that powerful keyword and put auras on them. She's been played intermittently in Modern too, primarily as a sideboard card in decks like Collected Company and Amulet Titan. She also has a single point in Legacy that came back in 2018 in a Maverick deck. And number 6, it's a 5-mana 5/5 that's also a god, the SCARAB god. Like a lot of gods, it's pretty insanely pushed. It starts with the very decent stat line that this whole video is about, and if it ever dies, it returns to your hand in most cases. And it also comes, importantly, with the very powerful ability to exile creatures from graveyards to make eternal versions of them. And it also helps you scry and makes your opponent lose life the more zombies you have in play. And of course, the eternal copies of creatures in graveyards you make are zombies. So that's a lot of crazy powerful text packed into one card. The SCARAB God was one of the most dominant cards around while it was in Standard, where it was a very powerful win condition for control decks. They could kill and counter creatures all game long until they played SCARAB God and started turning those same creatures into 4/4 zombies, and then they would run away with the game. It does also have a single point in a modern Grixis control deck, and I don't think it's impossible that it finds more points there going forward, and more recently it's gained points in Pioneer Fires of Invention decks. It is pretty likely to gain more points going forward. At number 5, it is LYRA DAWNBRINGER. In addition to having impressive stats and keywords for a 5-mana 5/5, LYRA is also an Angel Lord. Large flying creatures with lifelink tend to be a real problem. They make it pretty impossible to race. As a 5/5, every time LYRA hits an opponent, it creates a gap of 10 life between you and your opponent. On top of that, because she has first strike, that means she can even hang back and block super effectively in a pinch too. She was primarily played in more aggressive decks in Standard, like Vehicles, Boros Aggro, and even the Boros Angels deck, which got maximum value out of her pump ability. LYRA has been played in Modern too, primarily in the sideboard of blue-white control decks. Against more aggressive opponents who don't play much removal that can deal with a 5/5, LYRA Dawnbringer coming down is pretty insurmountable thanks to lifelink. In Pioneer, it's also gained points in White Weenie and Esper Control, and it's another card that's very likely to gain more points going forward. At number 4, it is THUNDERMAW HELLKITE. The HELLKITE gives you an efficient, hasty 5/5 body that also happens to get any flyers your opponent has out of the way, even killing the smaller ones. The HELLKITE was extra good in the Standard of its time because one of the best and most widely played cards in the format was Lingering Souls, and the HELLKITE was particularly good at dealing with those spirit tokens. Since rotating out of Standard, the HELLKITE has seen play in Modern whenever the metagame is more Lingering Souls heavy, and over the years it's killed some other key flyers in Modern too, like Vault Scourge. The HELLKITE doesn't have any points since 2017, but we can't entirely count it out, since it will inevitably see more play if and when Lingering Souls becomes a bigger part of the metagame. At number 3, it is Kenrith the Returned King, a 5-mana 5/5 with a whole bunch of sweet activated abilities. Controversially, Kenrith was printed as a buy-a-box promo for Eldraine, meaning that you couldn't actually get it out of packs. This wouldn't have been a big deal, except for the fact that Kenrith turned out to be super well positioned in Standard and was a card in really high demand. There were 2 separate decks that could really abuse Kenrith. One of these was the various Wilderness Reclamation decks, which had plenty of mana to spare and could sink it in to all of Kenrith's abilities. The other was Fires of Invention, which also generally had mana lying around since they could cast so many free spells. Ultimately, both of those powerful enchantments got banned out of both Standard and Historic. However, Kenrith has made the transition to Winota decks, and Kenrith is one of the more imposing humans that you can cheat directly into play using Winota. It's also gained points in the Pioneer versions of Winota and Fires of Invention, and is very likely to gain more points going forward. At number 2, it is Baneslayer Angel, a card not that dissimilar from LYRA Dawnbringer, which we saw earlier. The Baneslayer is the older card, but they both cost 5 mana for a 5/5 with Flying, First Strike, and Lifelink, but the Angel comes with protection from demons and dragons, while LYRA is an Angel Lord. Like LYRA, Baneslayer provides a frightening finisher that will be able to put the game out of reach for many opponents with just a couple of swings. The Angel was part of the Cobblade deck that dominated the Standard of 2011, and it didn't see a whole lot of play after various bannings weakened that deck. She has gained a few points since her recent Standard Legal reprint though, primarily in White Weenie decks. She's also picked up some points in Extended Zoo and Blue-White Control. In Modern, she's primarily been played in sideboards, and rolls very similar to LYRA Dawnbringer, unsurprisingly. She's also gained points in Blue-White and Esper Control decks in Pioneer, and she's yet another 5-mana 5/5 on this list, primed to gain more points going forward. And at number 1, it's Reality Smasher. The Smasher is a 5-mana 5/5 with trample and haste, meaning it can represent a very quick clock. In addition to that, it also isn't easy to kill with removal. If you want to do it, you have to discard an additional card or the spell is countered. This means this is going to be a 2-for-1 at worst in many situations, and your opponent will often be in a place where they just have to use removal on it or die. In Standard, the Smasher found its way into a few aggro decks, but it's truly frightening in formats with fast mana. In Modern, it helped break the format with other Eldrazi that were paired with Eye of Ugin and Eldrazi Temple. You could play a Reality Smasher as early as turn 2, which is pretty scary, especially because you probably played a turn 2 Eldrazi on turn 1. The Eye was eventually banned out of the format, but Reality Smasher has made the transition to modern Eldrazi Tron decks and continues to find success there. Obviously, mana can be even sillier in Legacy and Vintage, where Eldrazi aggro decks are top tier, and Reality Smasher is a big part of that. It looks well positioned to stay on top of this list for the foreseeable future, despite the fact that lots of cards behind it are also gaining points. Well, those are the 10 5-mana 5/5s that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. If you want to own any of the cards in this video, you can find direct Card Kingdom links for each of them in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, as that increases the chances that other people will enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos and you're one of those people who isn't already subscribed to the channel but watches my content, go ahead and subscribe. If you want to catch up on past videos, including around 430 MTG top 10s and several of them on creatures' stat lines, you should see some playlists on your screen shortly. And lastly, if you want to go the extra mile in supporting the channel, you can on Patreon. Thanks for watching.